All right, so we are once again live on the Resourceful Grief YouTube channel. And this is our second chance, or second time streaming. So hopefully this is going to be a little bit easier. I just got into my hotel room, by the way, so if it looks a little bit like I'm unpacking still, that's because I am. You can see my luggage behind me there. I have been traveling since 3 o'clock this morning, so you guys are getting it raw. You're getting it raw. Okay, we're good. We're good. I thought I had a situation. A little too raw. Tonight, we're going to be going over The Lion King and why The Lion King is perhaps one of the best teachers that we can have when it comes to grief. And we're going to do it through the lens of archetypal storytelling. All right. So, by the way, if you don't know me, my name is Peter Schwartz. I am the creator of the Resourceful Grief Journey. And what caught my attention so much about The Lion King, and then I realized actually this is true of all archetypal stories, is that they actually run the viewer through the resourceful grief process in the movie. I don't think it's as effective as the way we would run somebody through it. I really feel like I got something here. Nope, just the way the barber did my beard. Okay. So what caught my attention here is that I was surprised that the core of the resourceful grief journey has to do with a process that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But I was shocked to see it in all of our archetypal stories. What's an archetypal story? An archetype, if you think about whether it's Romeo and Juliet, or The Lion King, or King Arthur, or the Bible, our greatest narratives, religions, myths, stories, the stories of our lives, if you look at all of these stories, you will see certain themes. If you kind of like go up a level, certain themes rise up. And certain figures, certain journeys in the stories tend to repeat themselves. And if you think about what is a story, what is art, right? Art is the projection of the unconscious mind, right? The projection of the mind coming out onto the canvas, right? So if you see one of the paintings behind me, this is hotel art, but good art happens when a person's unconscious mind is allowed to project onto whatever the canvas is, in this case, a story. So there are certain themes that emerge, certain roles, journeys, etc., that are universally true in human experience, and these are called archetypes. So, for example, the hero's journey is an archetype. The king or the queen, that role of the sovereign, who, if you think about what that is archetypally, the king and the queen, they wear a crown, and that's supposed to channel divinity down through the crown out into the kingdom and generate order. So there are archetypes. There are recurring archetypes in our stories. And of course, grief, loss, life, death are archetypal stories. And so sometimes we can get to truth better, faster, easier, deeper through archetype than we can through literal truth. If you think about, you have a left hemisphere of your brain and you have a right hemisphere of your brain. Or if you're more into the classic psychology stuff, you could have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind. Your left hemisphere, while you're awake, inhibits information from the right. So literally, there's activity happening in your right hemisphere, and your left hemisphere is inhibiting that information, unless you're dreaming. unless you're in an altered state, meditation, some type of ritual, etc. In these liminal spaces, in dream spaces, in psychedelic spaces, in these spaces, the right hemisphere is allowed to communicate more fully, and we actually have access to more of our brain. But another way in which we can communicate effectively from the right and the left hemisphere is through story and archetype. So story narrative becomes a powerful way for us to communicate to the parts of our mind that aren't logical, that aren't conscious mind oriented. And our greatest traditions have for a long time known this. And The Lion King itself, when they made it, they were consciously attempting to tell an archetypal story, but they also unconsciously were projecting a lot of good material. So what we're talking about here is The Lion King, the hidden grief psychology of The Lion King. The hidden grief psychology of The Lion King. So what we're going to do without further ado is we're just going to dive into it, and I'm going to go through a little bit of I'm going to go through the story chronologically and introduce the archetypes. And I'm going to point out where this maps one-to-one with my experience with grief, with other clients' experiences with grief, and what we can learn from this. So diving right into it. If you remember the opening scene of The Lion King, and if you haven't seen it in a while, definitely go back and watch it. There is this incredible opening scene where the sun rises on the pride. And they have that awesome Disney song, right? And you see the sun coming up on the pride. And if you look at this archetypally, what is the light? What does the sun rising represent for us? Well, in the dark, when we're asleep, right, or when it's dark out, you can't see. So you can't attend, okay? You can't pay attention. You're not conscious of the environment. You're unconscious of it. So darkness, we could say, is unconsciousness. Light comes up. You are enlightened, illuminated, and suddenly now you can see and you can attend. You can begin to become conscious, right? So light throughout the story light and darkness become a powerful storytelling device. And we will see shortly how the characters are immersed in the unconsciousness, the darkness, the light, and how they bring light to the darkness and vice versa as we start to go through it. So the other thing that happens right kind of early on in the movie is the birth of Simba, right? So we have Simba's born, we got Zazu here, and Zazu holds him up in front of everybody. And the archetype that we're looking at here is the divine child, the archetype of the divine child. And this is an extremely common archetype. You think about, the baby Jesus, for example. The divine archetype represents pure potential, absolute potentiality. Think about what it is when you're looking at a baby. That baby is just pure potential. They can be absolutely anything. And that's where the story starts us off and also brings us into this place of the circle of life, right? So the movie is constantly reintroducing this circle of life, and we're getting introduced to the birth of Simba here. So as the story progresses, Simba is hanging out with his pops, Mufasa, and they're sitting here, and Mufasa is pointing out to Simba the kingdom And he says, the kingdom is everything that you can see that the light touches. Okay, so this is deeply, deeply meaningful for us. And I promise you this will relate to grief shortly. The kingdom is everything that the light touches. So the king is standing on Pride Rock and he's saying, the kingdom is everything the light touches. What did we say the light was again? Consciousness. What does the king do? The king makes order out of the kingdom, right? Stabilizes, centers, brings the divine goodness down through the crown, the divine light, if you will. And everywhere that light touches, you have a good kingdom, if you have a good king. And then right around this moment, Simba, he goes, he points out this shadowland over here, this shadowy area. And he goes to Mufasa, he goes, what about that place, right? And Mufasa goes, you must never go there, right? But already you can see the edges of where the light is, and there's the shadowland, the place where consciousness has not yet been able to reach that place. So they're going on, and Mufasa gives them this little talk about the circle of life. Everyone is connected. We eat the antelope. We then die and then become grass. The antelope eat us. We're all connected in the circle of life. Beautiful stuff. And then Simba and his girlfriend, his childhood buddy at this point, Nala, they go explore the Shadowland, which is actually a very heroic thing to do. There's this character, Simba, has a tremendous amount of courage, right, and bravery, and he goes and he starts to explore the Shadowlands. Well, the thing about the Shadowlands, right, it's literally an elephant graveyard. So this elephant graveyard, when we look at it, what are we actually contending with here? Simba is walking face to face with the catastrophe of life, which is death, right? And while he's in the Shadowlands, he gets to meet these guys, and he quite literally comes face to face with his death. He encounters malevolence, evil, right there in the Shadowlands. And luckily, Mufasa jumps in, and he saves Simba's butt, right? Here's the thing that I want you to remember about this, okay? This is the part that's really interesting and really important, is that the king can enter the darkness. The king, the mature archetype of the king, or if you're a woman watching this, the mature archetype of the queen, in other words, the mature psyche, can go into the darkness and come back out, right? The king has the ability, the mature psyche has the ability to confront the Shadowlands there. And in fact, not just confront, but save Simba and Nala from the Shadowlands. So already we're kind of setting some things up here, but this is where the movie becomes very much directly about grief. So we have this guy up here, if you remember from the movie, Scar. Scar is a character of malevolence, of evil. He's the evil brother, right? He's the king's evil brother. And he tricks Simba into becoming trapped in a stampede, and then tricks Mufasa to go save him, and eventually he kills Mufasa, right? And the reason why this is so relevant to us, in grief work, is this is an absolute catastrophe. And I think one of the things that is true regardless of how we experience loss, regardless of how we experience it, it is a catastrophe of epic proportions. Whether I have an evil brother who conspires to kill the king or not, there is something deeply unjust and unfair and wrong about the inevitability that I'm going to lose the people that I love the most. There is something wrong. It's wrong. It's unjust. It's unfair. It's just wrong, right? And it's that sense of like, this should not have happened. This is wrong for this to have happened. And then, of course, because the voice of malevolence being Scar here, he tells Simba, the king is dead, and if it weren't for you, he'd still be alive. Right? So this is the voice of malevolence. The voice of malevolence convincing Simba that he's responsible for his father's death. How many of us in grief assume more responsibility than is reasonable for the loss? And I like the way the animators do it here, where it is the voice of the malevolent character that is speaking the guilt, who's accusatory. And a lot of times we do this to ourselves. But so Simba has this catastrophe happen, and this is where he's introduced to a new reality. He is now exiled from his previous life. He is now exiled from Pride Rock. He's exiled from his identity as the future king. He's exiled from his home. Reality and life have changed for him as he knows it, and he gets lost in the desert, right? And he is lost in the desert. So how accurate is this if you think about grief? If I lose somebody who's close to me, life as I know it has now changed. The circle of life, the Pride Rock, my reality, it's changed. There is no going back to that reality. And you're exiled from that. You are now kicked out of that reality, and then you find yourself in this liminal space. You're lost. You're in the psychic desert. And that is a terrifying place, but it is also a place of pure possibility. Now, take that with a grain of salt, right? When you're in that space, you're not thinking, oh boy, the possibilities. But in these liminal spaces, when we have been kicked out of our reality, exiled from what we know, we are in a place of pure potentiality. The trauma of the loss, however, typically flavors that exile, flavors that liminal space in a way where we don't always make really good decisions about who we're going to become, who we're going to be on the other side of it. Anyway, so he needs help. He's lost, and when you're lost in the liminal space, you got to survive. And so he meets Timon and Pumbaa. I don't know why I don't have Pumbaa in this slide, but he meets these characters out in that liminal space who teach him how to survive. They create a bridge for him between that old reality, and they give him a temporary new reality that allows him to function. And if you remember, this is the Hakuna Matata, right? It's an awesome song. No worries. No worries for the rest of your days. And let's get you eating slugs, right? So now you have a lion eating bugs. Okay, what you're seeing happen to Simba here is a reduction of his identity. Think about it. He is the true and future king. And he's eating bugs. He's eating bugs and he's going Hakuna Matata. This is not the behavior of the king. Right? So he's lost. He's lost his identity. He is in a he's in avoidance. He's avoiding the catastrophe of Pride Rock. He ran away from that catastrophe, which is understandable. It's understandable that he ran away, right? Appropriate that he even ran away. But he's still avoiding, in this liminal space, he's still avoiding who he is actually supposed to be, and he's avoiding metabolizing his new reality. Until Nala comes. Nala is the call. She is the call to come home and set right the catastrophe. And you can think of Nala as there's this yearning in us, the heart in us, this yearning in us to transform. We have a yearning to be the butterfly, the caterpillar, to go through the transformation to get out the other side. But nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to go into a transformational space, right? It's not always comfortable. As we know for Simba, he's going to have to confront some stuff. But the alternative of not confronting it, of not going through to the other side, is much worse. And so the call of the hero in you, in me, the call of the hero in all of us, is whether or not we're going to embrace the call to go through to the other side. Okay? And so he, like in typical mythology, he refuses the call the first time. But he runs into the guide character, Rafiki, and they're having this conversation where Rafiki mentions Mufasa, and Simba says to him, "Oh, you knew my father," past tense. You knew my father, past tense. And Rafiki says, "I know your father," present tense. I know your father, present tense. This is where we're starting to get into the core of the resourceful grief process. Listen to the language there. I know your father versus I knew your father. So the shaman here is already changing the relationship to Mufasa, where Simba has Mufasa in the past, gone. Rafiki has him in the present, here. I know your father, right? And then they go on this little chase where Rafiki says, follow me, I'll show him to you. And they go on this chase, and Simba is instructed to look down into the water. And as he's looking into the water, looking at his reflection, Rafiki's telling him, look harder, look harder. And then suddenly he sees in the reflection, Mufasa shows up, right? And he shows up in the clouds, and Mufasa gives him this line here. You have forgotten who you are, and so have forgotten me. Look inside yourself, Simba. You are more than what you have become. You must take your place in the circle of life. Okay, there's a lot there. So, understand. Simba looks inside the water, looks inside his reflection. He's looking inside and has an encounter in the here and now reconnection with his father. So that's the first thing. The core of the resourceful grief process is that we're changing the relationship of the person we lost from external to internal. And I was stunned because I came across this just for looking for things that would get good outcomes for clients. And when I used it with clients, amazing outcomes. I was blown away. Where I was really blown away was to find out that our literature, our mythology, our religious traditions, our spiritual traditions have this baked into it. Almost, I haven't found an exception. I have not found an exception to this. So when we talked about earlier, the unconscious mind is projecting onto the art, right? It's almost the way I'm looking at it, the unconscious saying, this is the resolution. The unconscious coming on saying, this is the resolution I need, right? So, or better yet, this is the deeper truth. This is the deeper truth. So think about it. Simba's reality, his truth, is shattered. He goes into liminal space. When this happens for us, we need a new truth to emerge, a higher truth that can metabolize the past, the catastrophe, but also creates a future. And so it has to be a higher order truth. A new truth has to emerge. So this could very well be the unconscious mind projecting, this is the new truth that can come through. So let's look at this line again. You have forgotten who you are. So in the encounter with the person he lost, he's remembering who he is. In grief, we lose ourselves because literally the people that we love are intertwined with us. Our identity is bound together with them. And so when we lose people, we do lose a piece of ourselves. And in order to reconnect to the Father, he had to go inside himself and reconnect to the part of him that's Mufasa. So quite literally, in doing this, he is remembering who he is. So you have forgotten who you are, and so you have forgotten me. The implication is the people that we love are in us. We carry the people we love in us. They live on through us. So when we forget who we are, we forget them. Look inside yourself, Simba. You are more than what you have become. You must take your place in the circle of life. And so this is a very, very, very direct call to Simba that this liminal space that you entered into after the catastrophe, you cannot stay here. You have to go into your future now. You have to take your place you have to allow who you are in your core. And so from an archetypal perspective, the mature psyche, the king or the queen, who inside of you has to emerge and move into your future. The new identity needs to emerge and be deployed into the circle of life, rather than the avoidance, the coping mechanisms, the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He is being called to become who he is. Now, it's a little scene where Simba and Rafiki are talking about what he's going to do. Are you going to run from the situation, or are you going to go into it? And Simba decides to return to Pride Walk. And now, look at the darkness that has overtaken Pride Rock. Pride Rock was a place of light, but the darkness has now consumed the light. So when we abdicate our roles, when we abdicate our duty, when we abdicate who we are to be in the world, our kingdom falls into darkness. The unconsciousness that Simba allowed himself to be in, the forces have taken over Pride Rock. And so he comes back and finds this, and now he has to go confront and face the catastrophe, which he does. He fights Scar, and we have a little note here. Healing requires the grappling with that which we've been avoiding, but with the new resources and with the new strength, we are now master of the psychological forces that we need to be. So think about it. He didn't go back to Pride Rock until he remembered who he is, until he encountered his father again and found him on the inside, until he had that new relationship internally and the reclamation of who he's supposed to be. He has these resources now, and he goes back and he faces the catastrophe. He also finds out that it was not him, Simba, who killed his father, but it was Mufasa. And so you think about this, what we have happening here is a new truth emerges. A new truth emerges. We talked about there was this reality, there was a truth. That reality is gone now. We're in this liminal space of, what is reality. And in going and facing it, now new truth is emerging. A new order is forming. A new meaning, a new sense of certainty is happening here. And ta-da, right? The light returns. Because now Simba, the king, has faced the darkness and brought light back to the kingdom. And you can see here, actually, you can see Mufasa there. So Mufasa is still here with him. And that's the core of the resourceful grief journey. So if you look at this photo, in this cloud here, you see Mufasa. And he's here in the circle of life. He's present in the circle of life. And this is the core of the resourceful grief journey. We call it felt presence, is the ability to take the person that we've lost and transform our relationship to them to one of felt presence, where we can feel them with us. They become a here-now connection with us. We transform it on the inside. And the power of this for people is just stunning. It's absolutely stunning to see for people. And I was stunned to see this in The Lion King, King Arthur, you name it. It's all over our histories, our myths, our religions. And now the neuroscience also confirms this, that people who maintain the relationship with the person they lost internally have better outcomes long term. So this is the invitation, is to learn how to do this. We have a workshop that we do every week starting the following Thursday. We're resuming them. So keep your eyes peeled for that. There should be a link down below if you'd like to sign up for that workshop. And I would love to share that with you. I'd love for you to be able to encounter what that felt presence is like. Stay tuned, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell. I'm going to be dropping a lot more content. This was a huge shift from what I do normally. I thought I'd experiment with some fun new content style. But yeah, we shall be back with more stuff soon.